You will know me as Skull the Norn.
Hey, welcome to another edition of our online YouTube channel for Fate of the Norns. Today I am joined by Challice, the author of Seith and Sword. Today we're going to talk about the novel a little bit and how it came to be. Seith and Sword was a little bit of a brainchild of us shooting the shit at some of the conventions. We shared some of the convention circuit. Chris played at one of my games in Peterborough. And Chris had written some really interesting stuff in the past as well. So we looked at how can we create a really interesting story somewhere in Midgard with a really nice Rolodex of characters. And, well, I'll let Chris actually tell you about the ins and outs of the novel.
Thanks, Andrew. Seith and Sword is a Dark Norse fairy tale. It involves essentially two slaves whose parents used to own the town that they grew up in. What ends up happening is their mother, Hain the Clever, from the spirit realm, decides to curse the entire town and kill everyone. When that happens, Vanadis and Gamli realize that we're going to be blamed for this. So what they do is they run. And sure enough, the lord of the town's nephew, Hardigan the Trusted, comes in. He sees the devastation that this curse has wrought, realizes that two slaves are missing, and of course does blame them. So it's a huge chase all across the Baltic Sea, going all the way up to Piola and all the way down to the Coronian Spit. Along the way, Vanadis and Gamli start to come to their own. Vanadis becomes a powerful Psychona. Gamli realizes that he has this gift when it comes to crafting, and he becomes this mystic blacksmith. And together they pool their talents just to survive and find a way to sort of get past this animosity. And as they go along, the interesting thing is I play with the idea that things get worse and worse for them. So things are bad, they make some mistakes, they get worse, and their reputation gets blacker and blacker. And it's not even necessarily their fault, because they begin to gather rumors on the way. The rumors compound their very, very terrible reputation, and it all ends in this huge battle in the Coronian Spit.
I really got caught up in these characters because you don't often see two characters that you kind of grow to love, then end up having been caught in these kind of really tough moral decisions. And sometimes you don't always agree with what they do. And they become these anti-heroes that you still love, but you start questioning them. And even the guys that are chasing them, you're like, wow, these characters are really interesting. You don't even know who to root for at one point. How did you kind of build up that dynamic between, I think I would call it like the pyramid of characters, where you've got your two anti-heroes and their bounty hunter?
Well, the idea with it is studying the sagas, because I got from a lot of it, you saw a lot of family feuds and so forth, and it's really not a story of good versus evil. It's a story of survival or war or gaining glory, essentially. So what I did is essentially I didn't think of them as good guys or bad guys. Vanadis and Gamli, they're on the run, and that forces them to do rather ruthless things. And it gets to the point where the two of them eventually don't necessarily even agree with each other's tactics, but they stick together because of ties of blood. Where Hardigan, I made sure, and I wanted to be sure of this, he had a good reason to chase them. Because given all the information he has, they are the villains that he sees them to be.
And he's so believable in his reasons that, you're like, oh my god, this guy's after your favorite characters right at the beginning of the story. Mm-hmm. But the more you get to know him, the more his reasons for all of his actions you can kind of relate with and say, well, you know what, this guy is actually going after these guys for really personal reasons that make sense. He's not painted as some shady assassin that's coming after your favorite characters.
Well, when I designed him, I thought the term Paladin of Odin, essentially. He is basically very, very devout, very, very righteous, and fair in many ways. It's just that he's also incredibly driven. So as soon as he comes into a sort of issue or a quest, he'll finish it to the end. And he also believes on the way that going this route is one step in his path to Valhalla. So he's not going to give that up.
So we've got a lot of interesting characters that are from the mortal realm of Midgard. And that was kind of our goal with the first two novels of Horn of the Kraken and Seith and Sword. We're going to have more novels that deal more with the heavens, the gods, the giants. But the novel does touch upon some divinities. Maybe you can touch upon some of your favorites.
Probably my favorite one of the divinities was Lohi, the Witch Queen from the Kalevala. She is essentially painted as this sort of dark figure that is the opposite to the wizard Vainamurnin, who is a great Finnish folk hero. But her story is so tragic, and you can see sort of why she does sort of the terrible things she does. And she's mentioned in Denizens of the North, so I included her, and she ends up becoming this powerful, almost like dark mother figure. One of the other characters that I liked, at least with the divinities, it's touched upon briefly, but was the idea of Vainamurnin, her opposite, who's this like great hero who also is a musician, who's a wizard, who's a little unlucky, and he makes a brief appearance.
Unlucky in love.
Unlucky in love, but he makes a very, very kind of profound appearance. And then along the way, I do kind of mention things kind of happening with Lothi and Odin and even Angerboda, but they're all kind of in the background. So I try to make it like they are very much forces that are alive in the world, but I don't completely show them. And that way you kind of have this sort of like mystery and magic kind of as part of it. Actually, Lothi plays actually a significant part, especially in the development of Vanadis. And you kind of get to see her influence along the way.
So that brings us to the fact that we're looking at multiple mythologies within Fate of the Norns. And that's kind of the goal of the game world, is to bring you, your Norse myths, your Celtic myths, your Finnish myths, and your Baltic myths. And Chris chose, around the Baltic to represent 3 mythologies. So the Baltic, the Finnish, and the Norse. Did you have any challenges in that? How did that all come together for you?
Well, Denizens of the North was my main resource to grab everything, because it does have a lot of really, really cool information. Of course, I drew from the Eddas and also from the from the Icelandic sagas and the Eddas. I had to do a bit of research too. I ended up, before writing the novel, I read the Kalevala, and it had such an effect on me is that it colored the entire sort of novel. So you get this sort of thing with the Forge of Ilmarinen, which, again, just amazing. What I kind of filled in it. One of the biggest compliments I've had with the novel is it made people more interested in the Kalevala. And then you go all the way down to the Baltic Sea, where you actually can't find a lot of information on Lithuanian mythology. I had to do a lot of digging to find even like a bit of their culture and how they lived in that area. And I was fortunate to find some like viable sites. I had you to sort of vet it against.
Yeah, that was good. Like, I expected you to come and ping me when we got to that point in the story, because I do have some sources, and they're mostly all in Lithuanian. Mm-hmm. So, and most of them are not digitized. So we had to do a little bit of, okay, who are the characters you want to dig into? All right, let's, get a little bit of info and kind of jot that into an email and bring those to life for the first time in English.
Well, it was cool also to use like the hero Naringa. I mean, just being able to kind of like include her briefly in the novel was really awesome, because it shows a part of the world which is kind of amazing. Also, like the Coronian Spit. I wanted a dramatic real-world place for the novel, and the Spit is perfect. I mean, it's this huge bank of sand, like roughly about like a kilometer wide and many like
miles
hundreds
long.
Kilometers long. It's like you're sailing through the Baltic and then suddenly desert, dunes. Yeah. And it was just perfect. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better place.
Hey, when we make this into a movie, that's going to be some awesome scenery for the final scenes.
Oh, that would be that would be great. The other thing too is, when I did the novel, I did a lot of studying of the landmarks and sort of what the land and area looks like. I watched a lot of Swedish, a lot of Lithuanian, a lot of Finnish travel videos, and I'm like, I kind of want to go there.
Nice.
It also gives you a good idea, because the neat thing about the Baltic is you're sailing all throughout it. And there's all these like islands and so forth, and seeing the landscapes gives you a good idea of what it would look like and how they would travel. Actually, one of the most interesting things and frustrating things is there was one part where I had them go up the Insulaven, which is essentially this huge like river. And at the time, I thought when they went to Mirkwood, they would ride. But then I did my research, found in the Denizens of the North novel is there's this huge river that goes right up into it. And I'm like, why would they ride? They would sail. So that actually changed to sailing, and it led to one of the really cool scenes in the book, involving them sailing in the like giant lake at the center of Mirkwood.
I don't know if you got a chance to use like satellite view, and with satellite view, you can actually get like street views and stuff like that to kind of really get a good layout in terms of what do the fjords look like? Do you
yeah.
describe them as hundreds of feet tall, or are these fjords, like maybe only 30 feet?
And one more thing, if you've read Denizens of the North, Bargisa the Firewolf makes a huge appearance. So there you'll be able to learn a lot more about her background and where she comes from.
Exactly.
And she was one of the biggest characters that struck me in Denizens of the North.
So yeah, Neringa and Varghese the Firewolf are going to make an appearance in the Illuminated Edda, so look forward to that. And Chris, well, thank you very much for coming out and speaking to us, and I look forward to next novel.
Glad I could drop by.